do it.
All right. Welcome to the first episode of the Engineered Performance Podcast. This is the Engineered Performance Institute. So we kind of had a previous podcast going a couple years ago, and we decided to revamp things and reorganize things with the Engineered Performance Institute, and that's what you're getting. So this first episode, we really wanted to focus on what is the kind of the base layer of coaching, clinical practice, kind of any sort of human interaction, I guess, especially in our field of human performance and rehab, kind of any professionals in that field. I think having a strong base understanding of human interaction and communication is just absolutely vital and really the foundation of what you lay a lot of your skills and knowledge on top of. So that's where we wanted to start. And so this is episode 1. We're really going to dive into human interaction and communication and how that pertains to both sports performance. We're going to have Alex kind of talk on his experience in coaching and how different communication styles has been integral into his career. And then I'll kind of throw in my anecdotes on what that looks like on the sports performance side and how that's kind of evolving as we go too. So it should be fun.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think to start right away, let's kind of talk about the importance of human interaction and communication. Like explain to me why this would be the base layer, why you think we would start here.
So I view it as communication, right? It doesn't matter exactly how much you know and what you know if you can't properly learn how to communicate and interact with others.
For sure. Have you ever heard that quote that was like, how's it go? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah,
exactly. I love that.
Yeah. Kind of just goes one ear and out the other if you don't show that you care and are truly invested in them. So it's your duty as a coach, kind of how I view it, like make sure they're comfortable in there, they're energized, focused, and excited to come train every single day so that you can get the most out of them.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the first things you notice about a coach, like the way somebody commands a room and the way they interact with the different athletes. I think that's something that we noticed about you right away when you first started coaching with us, is that immediate like relationship that you'd start to build with the athletes, coming in, like, you know, giving everybody the fist bump. I don't know if that's still okay these days.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe elbow bumps from here on out. But I mean, right away, like that kind of establishes this relationship that's so important. That's the baseline to build things off of. And I think like the good like contrast of that is seeing a brand new coach or maybe an intern when you first throw them into a class when they're first able to start coaching. If you've given them more than they can like properly handle, you can see them like analyzing absolutely everything they're doing and forgetting about the person in front of them. You know what I mean?
And I've been there. Like I think everyone as a coach has been there at one point or another. Part of that's also like, learning how to relate to people, how to talk to them, finding your coaching voice. I think is part of, learning how to interact with your athletes.
Absolutely.
Whatever,
Yeah. Well, I've been reading Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew, and he has a quote in there early on in the book where he says, if you've decided on your coaching philosophies before you've decided or figured out your coaching identity, you've got your priorities backwards. And I loved that because I definitely think that's the approach most people take, because like strength philosophy and exercise science, like it's a science. Like you can go and learn it and study it and become better at it. Coaching identity and like how you communicate with an athlete, that's something that just like, it takes reps. Like you just have to, and it changes with every different athlete too. And we'll get into that a little bit too today, but, it's something that's like initially right. It's super, super glaring, whether it's a strength or a weakness for a certain person right away, I think.
Well, that's what, all the podcasts, all the, YouTube pages are about right now is just the science. What should we be doing? How should we be doing it? And they're not necessarily talking about like, how do you get that point across? How do you get to stick with these kids or adults,
For sure.
And I think part of it, just kind of diving in a little bit further here, to communicate and interact like effectively with humans, you got to have that base level of trust. And then kind of how do you build that trust, right? You got to be knowledgeable, kind of what you're saying, how we were talking earlier. You do need to know what you're talking about. It does matter what you know, but so that kind of entails, reading the books, doing the continuing ed, doing all the internships. It's definitely important to be knowledgeable. Kids and people can see when you don't know what you're talking about.
For sure.
And they won't be trusting you. You got to have a plan when you come in every single day, right? If you're just flying by the seat of your pants every day, they will see that as well, and it'll be hard for them to buy in to, the long-term goals that you have set and that they have set for each other and themselves. And then being consistent. You got to be consistent. And this can go a bunch of different ways. You got to be consistent in your expectations. Those have to be clear from day one when kids come in. If you're not clear with your expectations, things start to get a little bit murky. You let one thing slide, next thing you know, you've lost, complete control of the room, and people are just doing whatever they want.
Absolutely. I think that's like one of the biggest points I want to drive home during this podcast for sure, is like having that consistent like standard always is just so important for a coach, because like you just said, if you let one thing slide, you lose control of the room, you lose respect from your athletes. And how important is that? One of my favorite examples is I was at a coaching talk recently with Matt Slampa. He's the owner of Brickhouse Fitness out in Bondurant, and he's one of the strength coaches for Southeast Polk Rugby. And if you know anything about rugby locally, I mean, they are the most successful program right now in the state. I mean, I think they've won every state championship since rugby started. It's an unbelievable run. But he is a guy to talk to about standards. That guy has set a standard, and nobody falls below it. If you do, you're not exempt. And, he tells a really good story about one of their absolute star athletes who, I forget exactly what he did, but he messed up somewhere along the way where he didn't show up to a practice or something like that. And he wasn't allowed to play in that weekend's game, and it potentially cost them. And other people were saying, we get it. He's been punished, but let him in. We got to win this. Yeah. And if you let that standard slip one time, you open yourself up to such scrutiny, and you lose the respect and the control of the room and of your athletes who are looking at you to say, hey, you've held me to that standard. Yep. Who's he? Yeah. And that's something that's extremely important. So it's a fine line between having a good relationship with the athlete, but also saying like, you're here for this, and this is where I'm going to hold you to.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Also, you got to be able to focus on yourself, like what you can control, and then preach that and show that within your preparation, your attitude, behavior, and effort every single day. Your athletes will start to see that, mirror that, mimic that, not just hopefully in the gym, but also within their life as well.
Absolutely. And
then definitely got to value effort over performance. Kids will come in and they'll fail. Like, that's a part of the process, learning process. But they have to know that it'll be okay. Like, coach, will be here to pick me up. And as long as you're giving me your full effort and full attention every single time, they have to trust that you're not going to just be mad at them,
Absolutely. I think that's another one of the most important parts of being a coach, because I don't know if any of you guys, or if you've read The Talent Code, or if you've heard about it. It's a book I've been diving into recently, and it's really heavy on the idea of deep practice. And the idea behind deep practice is you're focusing and practicing something that's just maybe outside of your ability. So something you're failing at, but then focusing on what went wrong, fixing that failure, going back and doing it again and again and again. And that deep practice, something that's not fluid, but you're practicing something that is really hard for you. You're correcting the errors and going back, is so important for learning. And it creates, the book goes into like how it helps myelinate certain pathways, and which just basically speeds up circuits, which really leads to mastery of skill. And so having that, making sure that the room is a comfortable place where you can fail and be in that deep practice zone is so important. Oh, yeah. I think without that, you're afraid to fail. You don't really push yourself, and you keep yourself in this comfortable zone that maybe, it's comfortable, but you're probably not really learning. You're not pushing to that next step at all. Yeah. And the book, again, he uses an example of watching this, I believe it was a young girl playing the flute. And he was talking about how she was playing a song that she knows and just flying through it, just ripping through it. It sounds beautiful, but her brain is elsewhere, right? Yeah. Like she's figured it out. That's fine for her. She probably got no better in that instance, right? But then he watches her struggle like 5-10 minutes with this one song that she keeps messing up. But he can see her like squinting and staring at the music and like, hey, what went wrong on that last one? And goes back and fixes that note. Mm-hmm. It might sound choppy for those first few minutes or those first few times through, but then it starts to like even itself out. Like, that's deep practice, right? And that without that failure, or without being comfortable, like sitting in that spot, hearing herself hit a wrong note, where would she have gone, right? And that translates to the weight room so easily, or the strength and conditioning platform, just because like you have to be able to say, hey, I'm not really great at this. Like, where am I messing up? Yeah. Can I practice in that zone a little bit? It's huge.
Yeah, it's part of like once you've built that trust, you allow them to train fearlessly. Because you've taught them that you value effort over performance, right? We could all go out there and throw on more weight than we can do, and we'll fail. but as long as they're putting in the effort and we're, teaching them to train safely and we have a certain progression we want them to go through, they'll get to where they need to go, but they just kind of have to trust that process, trust that we're not going to put them into a sticky situation. Some learning doesn't happen without a little bit of failure.
For sure.
And just getting them to know that is definitely important.
I agree. I think that goes back to the trust, like you just mentioned multiple times too. Like if I trusted my coach, then he tells me like, hey, you're ready for this. And I believe in him, and I've like gained enough evidence to say that he knows what he's talking about and this is a good move. Then even if I like you said, I can train fearlessly. I can go in there and saying like, he thinks I could hit this, or he thinks I can do this lift. Like there's something to that, as opposed to, we've all been like the young, dumb high school kid in our basement saying like, oh, just put as much weight on the bench as you possibly can. Right. That's different. Like, of course that bar's going to come down on my chest. Yeah. But if I got my coach there saying, hey, you've trained for this, I've prepared you for this, you've done the work, like, let's go get it. Mm-hmm. That's a different type of deep practice. That's a different type of learning.
I think like part of the fearlessness of training too is not just like confidence. It is a big part of that, but also that you've hopefully instilled them the ability to learn. Like they'll listen, they may fail, but they'll recover, they'll improve, and they'll get back at it. Like the ability to be able to do that, I think, is big time with many young kids, because a lot of times people are afraid to fail because I don't know whatever it may be. They're afraid to fail and they'll just kind of debilitate.
Absolutely.
And you gotta be able to teach them to get through that, learn from it, recover, and then get back after it. I think that's definitely one of the more intricate parts of like teaching a kid in the weight room.
I agree. I can see that.
Teaching them how to squat, like they'll get there with that, but you got to be able to teach them because they're going to fail throughout their life too, right? So teaching them how to recover from that quickly, hopefully, and get right back under that bar, get back after whatever it was, is an important skill to instill in them.
I love that, and I agree. I see that as early as my 6-year-old daughter. Right now, she's kind of at the brink of this gymnastics class that she's in. We really want to push her to go to the next one. And that first, when I first asked her, like, hey, do you want to go up to the bigger girl class? Like, and pointed it out to her in the room. I thought she'd be really excited. And her first reaction was, no, like they can do a flip. I was like, yeah, like you're going to learn that. And she goes, but I can't do a flip. Mm. I was like, yeah, you're going to learn that. And so she was so afraid of that at first. Like, she mentioned multiple times, like, what if they laugh at me? Like, I think creating that environment where, like, of course you're going to fail at this. Yeah. Like, you have to. Mm-hmm. But that's how you get better and eventually are able to do it. I never did a flip when I was a kid. Still can't do a flip now. It's not like it just comes. Mm-hmm. You got to try it and fail at it. And now I'm pretty sure I'd break my neck, so I'll never try it. But, like, she didn't even know that yet. Yeah. So that's key, right? Like, having that trust to train fearlessly, not just under a heavy weight, mm-hmm. but, like, saying, hey, I can fail. Yeah. It's not going to crush me.
Exactly.
It's a good thing.
Yep. Yeah, and then I think going back to kind of the consistency point, like as a coach, kids should know what to expect from you when they walk in the door. Should know, you're going to be there to greet them, give them a fist bump, get them pumped up, ready to go for the lift, whatever you got for them that day. And then just be consistent in how you react. There shouldn't ever be a situation if a kid fails a lift or messes up a step in one of your agility drills. Like he or she should know that, you're not going to get all upset with them and start rolling your eyes at them or yell at them. They should know how you're going to react to every single situation. So that doesn't weigh on them in the back of their mind, because that takes up space in their mind when they're training. And that's space that they should have to be able to focus on their attitude, their effort, their energy that day, as opposed to how is someone going to react to what I'm doing. So just being consistent with how you react to your kids, how you talk with them, going to speech and body language, how you carry yourself plays a big part in how your athletes see you. You may not even think about it. A lot of times I catch myself, whether I'm just like even just slouching throughout the day. If I'm tired, I'm kind of dragging a little bit. They'll notice that in an instant. So you have to embody that positive energy for them, because they're going through stuff. So an example, I was a special ed associate at elementary school for a little bit, and one of the teachers was like, no matter what you do, like no matter what's going on in your life, like you can't these kids need you, so you can't bring whatever kind of baggage you got with you into here. You need to be a positive role model for them. And that kind of stuck with me since. I remember I hit a deer on the way in to work one morning before going to school to work, and I was like, this is not a great start to my day.
No.
And I just had to shake it off and
Yeah.
bring some positive energy because, those kids that I was working with needed that. And not to say that you can't show that you're human, because that's a part of connecting with kids as well. Like,
That's true.
You can't just be this invincible person, because that's not who you are.
For sure.
You got to be able to connect. But they definitely need some stability, some consistency, and just how you carry yourself and what kind of energy you bring to the weight room every day.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. Like, they need to be able to know what they're walking into. It shouldn't be a guess, because like you said, it takes up space.
Yep.
My best example of that is I used to work at a physical therapy clinic that was within Fitness Quest 10, which is Todd Durkin's place. You know Todd?
I think so. I think my roommate worked for him out in San Diego.
Yeah, in San Diego. Yeah, so he's a cool guy, but like what that guy brings isn't like revolutionary training ideas or any, like he's not moving the needle on that end of things. What he's bringing is just passion. Like, that dude is overflowing with just heat.
Yeah.
Like, and so I remember I used to talk to him about this. Like, how are you doing that? Because every day he comes in, the dude is smiling. Like, there's no way his life is that good.
Yeah.
And I remember he used to tell me, he'd say, my coaches and myself, when we're in here, we only have good days and great days. And I loved that, because he's like, dude, I have bad days. Like, I go home and things hit the fan sometimes. Like, of course. He's like, but when I come in here, people are coming in here expecting this. Like, this is going to be the best hour of their day. I loved hearing that, because like, it's not like he was putting on a show, because have a shitty day and then come in and smile and see what happens to your mood. You know what I mean? Like, things, you will change, you will turn around too. But the same thing goes for the kids that maybe you don't know what's going on in their home life or what's going on with school, or there's all sorts of interesting individual situations. They come in here, if they know that their coach is going to be outgoing, positive, they're going to be there to like have their back, reinforce them, make sure that they're here to get better. That's like just a constant in their brain that they can always count on. And like you said, it takes away that unnecessary stuff in their brain. They're able to concentrate on what they're here for, to deep practice, to get better. And there is something to that for sure.
Yeah.
And like I said, not just for the athlete, many times for the coach too. And how you're talking to people, like that's such a whole nother topic as well. Another example I like to use a lot is I went to this lecture once with Mike Boyle, who's like definitely one of the best coaches of all time, I would imagine. Most people would agree with me. And he used to say, he trains very different people. And he used to say, every kid's life is a mixture of shit and ice cream. And he'd say, if they've had too much shit, you got to mix in some ice cream. They've had too much ice cream, you got to mix in some shit. And the different populations that he had were interesting, right? He'd train like inner city weightlifting kids who sometimes needed a little bit of like positive role modeling and reinforcement. And, he treated them differently. Yeah. And then he treated a lot of like the BU hockey team. Sometimes they come from a little different background, privileged background sometimes. And so he'd mix in, and he'd be a different coach sometimes with that group. And it's whatever motivated that group. He found out what drove them specifically, right? Like sometimes they got too much of one thing, and he had to say, hey, come back in order to gain my respect and to progress in here. I got to treat you a little bit differently. Yeah. And so that's something that I think is interesting too. Like you have to be super fluid about it. Like it changes with the person you have in front of you.
So yeah, I think part of that being consistent is also, you got to be flexible, because every person is going to be different, like you're saying. And that kind of brings me to the next point, like how to connect and interact with them. You got to get to know them, on a personal level, not just who they are in here, but who they are outside of the training facility. Showing that shows you care, and that'll also kind of give you an insight on how you need to coach them. Let's say someone is acting out a little bit in a training session. More often than not, you don't want to address that right then and there to the whole class.
Sure.
Have I done that before? We've all probably done it. Some kids do respond positively to that, being kind of called out in front of their peers, and they pick it up a little bit. But then you got to know that about that person, right? That's kind of part of the process of getting to know them. And it's a crazy thing because everybody's different.
Yep.
So you have to take the time to get to know them and figure that out.
Exactly.
It's just
so
many moving parts.
Exactly. We kind of talked off air a little bit too about certain kids. Like it's hard to judge a book by its cover for sure. 'Cause some kids look like, hey, I'm going to need to give this kid like very direct like response, right? You're acting out. This is how I want you to act, right? Or this is not the lift. This is how I want you to do. When it could be the complete opposite. If you actually knew the kid, he needed like, hey, that was a great job. Next time, try doing this, and it's just different. So sometimes I think that's the magic in training a little smaller groups so you can get to know your athletes. And I understand everybody doesn't have that ability, but that is something that I think we do really a good job of in here, and that I kind of cherish the ability to really learn who our athletes are, the background they've come from, their family life. Sometimes we get to know their parents, definitely what sport they're playing, how busy they are in school, like just showing up and telling them like, hey, how was that math test you took on Friday, right? It makes them think like, wow, this person's here and they care. Like that's something that's completely missed sometimes because we get so stuck in the sets and the reps. And there's power to that for sure. I kind of want to add like an anecdote on the sports med side too here, because a lot of the times I think a huge majority of our success sometimes is teaching an athlete that like, I'm here for you, whatever you need, I care about you. And a lot of times it's convincing them that they're not mortally wounded and like maybe they aren't their sport. So, we get young athletes in here, 16, 17, 18 years old, and they are a gymnast, you know what I mean? Or they are a softball player or baseball player or football player. And now they tear their ACL. Like next 9 months to 12 months, like who am I? Sometimes that freaks people out. Their entire identity from the time they were children to this age is kind of in question. And I think a lot of the magic behind like the sports medicine lies right here in the communication and human interaction piece, where you come out and say, hey, the first question I ask this person is not how their knee feels. It's, hey, what's new? How you been? What you been watching on TV? Like getting to know this person and telling them that, hey, I care about who you are as a person because you are not a softball player. We're going to get back to softball. You're going to be dominating softball. But I want to know, like, how was your day? I think that's huge. I think you get this buy-in where this person says, not only is this person here to really help me get back to my goals, but they care about my goals. So they got that in focus, Yeah,
empathy is a huge part of it. I mean, just being able to talk to kids is one thing, and then just to be able to connect with them is a different thing. Because we were all there once, but it's definitely a different world now than even 10 years ago when I was a senior in high school. So it's definitely a art form to be able to interact and connect with them, and then still keep that professional level to it as well.
For sure,
important, because there's once again a fine line of being their coach and then being their friend.
Yep.
So that the balance of that is definitely not difficult to find, but I mean it's a fine line for sure.
Yeah, just because it's always moving. It's a moving target all the time, and like I said, I think creating that interaction by making them understand that you're there and you care about more than just that sport or what they're there for, but then holding them to a standard.
Yeah, I think the standard is the most important part. Like,
I think it's the most important part.
You can, by setting that standard, you can then kind of dive into getting a little more personal with them to show that you care and kind of build that connection and trust.
But they understand that like this is the line, right? And I think that's huge for sure. So what we got? We hammered building trust, definitely. So new learning doesn't happen without some failing. We hammered that. What else we got?
I kind of want to talk about even just like the language aspect of it when we talk about being consistent. When it comes to like coaching and cueing, and you got to be consistent with what you say as well. So or not necessarily what you say, but how you say it.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that we see that a lot on the sports med side as well. So again, like if I'm looking at somebody's injury and my whole body is going in shock, right? Yeah, exactly. That's going to freak this kid out, because that happens a lot to us because, they come in, hey, my shoulder hurts, and we do different orthopedic tests on them. And so sometimes they're positive and you're thinking in your head, this person needs an MRI, potentially this labrum's torn, Like I just said, to that person, it could mean my entire identity is about to be stripped from me.
Yeah.
So being able to understand those things and lay it out, especially when you do have to lay some bad news on people, it's to be able to lay it out in a position where, hey, I'm here for you. I care about you. We're going to take this to the next step. This is the layout. This is the plan, and making sure that they understand that, like through that communication, that is not just a dollar bill on top of their head. Right. And it's so important. And we were talking earlier off air too. I once spoke to Mike Bledsoe, who's a really cool guy, a strength and conditioning coach. He now like runs classes that actually coaching coaches, which is super cool. But he once told me that you got to imagine that out of the back of your brain is a projector, right? It's projecting onto a screen behind you of everything that's in your head, of what you're actually thinking. So regardless of what you're saying, the person you're talking to can look right behind you and see exactly what you're thinking. And it's true, because the way you're acting, whether it's conscious or subconscious, the way your body, the way you have your body language, what you're actually saying, how you're saying it, that people are not stupid.
Yeah, it'll show.
They pick up on that right away, right? And so ever since he said that, it's just rang so true to me that when I'm talking to an athlete and I'm trying to convince them that, hey, you're not mortally wounded, you're going to get better. And in fact, you're going to be better than you were, and we're going to excel and meet these goals. I fill my head with that, right? Like it's got to be so genuine and true. And I fill my head with that as if they can see exactly what's in there, right? And so even though they can't literally see the words in my head, I know that they can like feel that outward expression, because it consumes me at that moment, right? And I think that's really important. I think if you, as a new coach, somebody that's getting used to like really getting out there and talking to people, or a new clinician, But I think as a new coach or a new clinician, somebody that's getting used to like explaining some potentially bad news, or a coach who's explaining like a new, maybe difficult thing to do. I think if you have that in your head and you pretend that they can see exactly what's in there, it completely changes the way that you're interacting, the way you're showing that to that person.
Yeah. And that comes with experience. And, first time you go through that, you're learning as much as they are,
Absolutely.
And how you're going to react to it, and you don't know until you're in that situation, but you got to put yourself in those situations. That's where it comes down to, like, it's not necessarily what you know always, but how can you get that across? So it's like all the internships you do, all the fridges you stock are great, but you got to get out there and experience it as well, and talk to people, get to know them. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's the most important part of our internship, actually, because like we teach the fundamentals of like strength philosophy, right? What were the different energy systems and how to train them, like for sure. Like you mentioned, the knowledge base is crucial and completely vital. You have to know what you're talking about. If you can't communicate it, you haven't helped anyone, right? And I heard some quote about that too, is like the smartest person in the room that can't communicate it is the dumbest person in the room. It doesn't help. Yeah. And so if you're not, especially in these two professions, like we're in it to help people progress. If you can't guide somebody along that by effectively communicating what you're thinking, it doesn't matter what you know, right? You've lost it. So I think it's so vital. I guess that goes along with just being genuine.
Yep.
Like you have to care about it. This has to be something that you truly feel, or they're going to see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, people pick up on that pretty quick.
For sure.
And if they don't, they will eventually. So
for sure. And that kind of, you have written there that you want to be the coach that you want to train with, right? And I don't know about your experience, but I've got a good story about my experiences. I had a coach that I couldn't stand, like a strength and conditioning coach when I was in high school. And he's not the one that's there right now, so if he's listening. But the one that was there, the way he treated me and other athletes, it was something that I left there knowing that's not the experience I want to give a high school kid. And honestly, maybe I have him to thank for leading me down this road, because I remember graduating thinking I'm going to change that for somebody. So a couple different examples are when I was young, like early high school, like freshman, sophomore year, I was really undersized. I was tiny. So I didn't know what to do. But I found a private coaching place that did training basically. And they were 10 years ahead of their time. These guys were awesome. I always say this, I wish I could find the people behind Team Fitness. That was back in the day. They were so good. I don't know what happened to them. But I was training with them and loved it. And I was getting bigger, getting stronger, getting faster. And I didn't tell my coach, my strength and conditioning coach, because I knew he wouldn't be happy about it, which is immediately a red flag, right? But one day they had a commercial, so they had a camera guy come in and he took some videos of people working out, and I was in the background doing a lift. And of course that's on TV. Of course my coach sees it, and I immediately just get shit for it. Like all year long. That was what I was labeled as.
Holds it over your head.
Just held it over my head. And I remember thinking, like, dude, you have missed the boat. How are you not so excited that I come back here bigger, stronger, faster? Like, that's your job, and they just made you look so much better. And so that really frustrated me, and I remember thinking, that is the experience. That is not the experience I ever want. My kids is who I was thinking first to ever have. And then definitely like the athletes that I eventually had some sort of influence over. Another example is my little brother was a wrestler too. And he was a freshman, and another freshman was ahead of him in the lineup and was a starter for us. His kid was a stud, really good athlete. But one day we were training, we were doing these quad lunges. So we'd hold this med ball and we'd do lunges around the quad in the high school. And it was a burner and it sucked, right? But we ran out of med balls, and my brother had one, and that kid fell below the standard, right? He showed up late. And so logic says he doesn't get the med ball, right? Yeah. He has to do it either body weight or doesn't do it. He gets punished. But because who he was, he fell below the standard. He got allowed to come in, and actually the coach took the med ball from my little brother to give it to him. And I could tell you, I watched my brother's Cole. I watched Cole's face, and the joy of this entire sport left his eyes. That day was it. That was the end of wrestling for Cole. And I remember he left that practice and he was obviously upset, but really angry. And it's because that coach completely disappointed him. And so the fact that, like, we as coaches have the power to, like, really strip something that somebody really loves away from them, you have to take that seriously. Mm-hmm. And I knew that minute that coach is not who I want to be, right? And that's who I've kind of, as I've developed like my coaching identity, like somebody that's there for you and will hold that standard is something that's completely crucial to me.
Yeah. On the other side of things, like, I wasn't sure exactly what I was getting into when I went to college as far as what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. And it's when I stepped foot into West Branch High School's weight room where I met my good friend Phil now, who's kind of he is my mentor. I saw what he did to impact those kids. I mean, not only like physically, they were all beasts, but he had like such a connection with them. They see him driving down the road, they're waving out the windows to him. That he's impacted their life in such a way that influenced me to kind of do what I do now, and kind of why I wanted to get into this. It was just such a cool experience, and yeah, the other side of things, like, sometimes you find what you don't want to be, sometimes you see what you can be or what you want to be like. So that was kind of my experience with it.
Absolutely. I think it goes both ways. Like, unfortunately, I got a lesson on the side that I wish I wasn't on, but it led me to something pretty cool. And I think if I could have seen that other side, it would have been such a sharp contrast. Yeah. That would have been so obvious.
Yeah. I think we've all had both sides of the spectrum. But
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, at Team Fitness, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I walked in there and I had a place to come train and be encouraged and to progress. And look what happened. I got better, right? And when I was in the weight room at the school, complete opposite. I was afraid to fail, for sure. So I'd be criticized. I was afraid it wasn't training fearlessly at all. Yeah. And there was no like confidence inspired in that room. And it was different. And so, yeah, I agree. I think that is so vital because it can make or break a sport for a kid, honestly.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, this is exactly the same on the sports med side. Like, I can create an environment where an athlete is excited to meet their goals and they understand the path forward. Or we can create an environment like, yeah, this sucks. Like, come in, we'll do another set of 30. Like, that's a bummer, and that'll take somebody that's eager and excited about the sport and then completely crush their motivation or drive to get back to what they're doing. And honestly, that strips it from me, because my biggest joy on the sports med side is seeing a kid who is in love with something, and it potentially is taken away from them, and then giving them the power to take that back, right? So let's say an ACL softball player that I was just working with, having that gone, and as their senior year, missing that year, and understanding that, like, trying to figure out, navigate, like, college, who am I without this sport, and then getting it back, and like that first at bat, and just getting that text like, thank you, like, that is everything for me personally. So selfishly, this is huge, and something that I think you should, if you're a clinician and definitely a coach, you should strive to be that person for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, one of the coolest things about being a coach, or when a parent comes in and be like, so and so is telling me all about what you guys did at lift today, told me about his PR that he hit, or how he's getting better, how he's competing out there. That's one of the best parts of it for sure. Like when a kid or when an athlete leaves here or wherever gym they're at, and they go home and talk about it and they're excited about it and are ready to get back at it the next day, you've done a good job in establishing your values, creating that culture within your gym.
What's better, man?
Yeah.
What's better? That is the ultimate victory in this profession for sure, is to have somebody that completely falls in love with it.
Another part of training fearlessly, I think, is building on small successes. They say like small successes leads to bigger successes, right? And that part of learning is failing, as we talked about, but you also have to create some successful opportunities for them. Set them up for success a little bit so they can build some confidence. And confidence will lead to, some more fearless training, and they'll be able to build upon that. So
absolutely. I think there's the best example of that is in our teens group, or like training a younger kid, right? Like I mentioned, my daughter who's terrified to do a flip. If I tell her to do that flip day one, she's going to fail and be devastated. Yep. But if I say, hey, let's do a back bridge, and she could do a back bridge, hey, high five.
Yep.
Killed it. That's a step in the right direction, and she's excited and fearless to train that next step. That's huge, and especially for our teens.
Yeah, at that age, you definitely have to make training coming into the gym fun, something to look forward to. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to maintain that, through your junior high school, college, even into your adult fitness days. You gotta be able to enjoy it first and find the fun in the process.
Absolutely. I think falling in love with the process is everything. It's an overused term. It's a little bit cliche, but man, if you don't, there's not a victory every day, and some days it really sucks. Some days you wake up and you're not wanting to train. I mean, we have our 630 Alpha athlete group, and those kids, I can't imagine they wake up every day excited coming here. But they do. They show up. And, I put this on Instagram, and it was like our best post because I told somebody, I get asked that all the time because I'll have patients at 7, and I'll have patients always ask me, like, who's back there? Who's training at 6:30 a.m. as a high school kid? And my answer every time is champions, because it's the truth, man. They're coming in, they're waking up regardless how they're feeling, and coming in and getting after it. And that's special.
They see the big picture.
For sure.
I think part of being consistent, you got to be always positively reinforcing, whether it's the behavior you want to see, the attitude you want to see, the effort you want to see. You got to be positively reinforcing that. The other athletes will see that, will mimic that, and you'll also just start to see them build one another up. I mean, one of the other challenges here is like a lot of different kids come in from different schools, different age ranges, and building that team feeling within each class is part of the challenge, because they don't all know each other. But no matter what school they're from, they're all here to get better, and they're all here to challenge each other. That's the best part of it. You don't always want to be training with your friends.
No, for sure not. You can push a little bit. Yeah. Exactly. If you see that kid that like is always challenging you on the court, and now he's training with you, like you're not wanting him to do better than you.
Yep, exactly.
You're pushing it.
So just creating that environment as well. If they see you always being positive, building each athlete up, then they'll start to do that to one another, and you'll see good things happen.
Absolutely. I think one of the coolest things is seeing those kids, like the potential, what you might call a rival, like congratulate somebody on Instagram or social media, like, or maybe encourage them right before a game where they're playing each other. That's awesome. Like now we brought like 2 kids that should be going head to head and shouldn't
Which
be super
they
happy.
will.
They will.
The field,
they're going to get competitive. You want to like establish, exactly. You want to establish like this competitive streak, but you're here for each other.
Yep.
That's something that's invaluable, like outside of sport for sure. Like going on as, you're an 18-year-old kid. Most people aren't going to be doing this forever. Being able to like push somebody but also have their back is a skill, something that's really valuable later on in life too. So
I think, just bringing it kind of home here is my final point would be the coach, like you said, that you would love to train for. Come in every single day, excited to see them, excited to give everything you got, and just mimicking or showing them. Yeah,
I agree. I think that's exactly the last point that I want to make too, is the same thing on the clinical side. Like if you were injured, where would you be mentally? Like where would you be in your headspace? Do you want to have somebody there that's going to lay out a roadmap for you and show you, hey, this is what we're going to do, and I believe in you, and this is how we're going to get there, and I'm here for you when we do have drawbacks, but I'm still going to hold you to the standard. We're still going to do this this many times a day, and I'm going to need you to eat this, right? I need you to talk to this person. Holding somebody to a standard, but then showing them that you care. That's the clinician that I want to be under when I'm injured. And that's the coach that I want to be with when I'm trying to get better. And so I think if you just keep that in the back of your mind that, hey, I'm going to be the person that I wish I was for me, right? Or my kids. I think that kind of covers everything.
Yeah.
That's it.
I agree. Definitely.
Right? So I think, again, like this is the foundation. If you don't start here, I don't care how much you know. It's gone. It doesn't matter. If you can't communicate it, it doesn't matter. So starting right there, I think this is how we develop a perfect coach or a master at strength and conditioning as a coach or sports medicine as a clinician. You got to start here. So I love it. So I guess to leave things, my favorite resources right now, I mentioned them a couple of times, the talent code. I'm in the middle of that book right now. And so far I absolutely love it. I think it touches on a lot of the points I made today. Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew is fantastic. Again, hammers some of these points home and just really helps you identify what is your coaching identity before your strength philosophy. So important. So I'd say look into those two things for sure. If you're looking for more resources, do you have anything you want to mention?
The kind of books I was reading, Bruce E. Brown wrote them. I think he's got him and a couple guys who kind of collaborate, but definitely good coaching books. They cover a bunch of different topics.
For sure.
Yeah.
The last one that I'm going to get into, and I haven't yet, but I know has researched it in the past, is Nick Winkelman. He's a fantastic coach. He was a speed coach for Exos or Athletes Performance at the time. He's now the strength and conditioning coach for Ireland Rugby. He just wrote a book about like what you say matters. So it talks a lot about communication, and he dives into even more intricacies like between intrinsic and extrinsic cueing, like during the actual coaching. We can get into that too in a future podcast, but definitely sounds like he goes into a lot of this stuff and he's researched it in the past. So potentially a cool book to read. Again, I haven't gotten into that one yet, but that's next on my list. So
yeah, that's the whole other side of communication and language is the cueing. Getting that point across. So once you do establish that relationship, that trust, then it's time to, all right, I got to make this make sense for this person.
Exactly.
Another topic to dive into at some point.
For sure. And looking forward, next we're going to try to get a couple different people that are doing really well at this on the podcast, just to hear about their experience and how they've kind of identified their coaching identity and how they've really built that up to be who they are today. And on top of that, just a decent or a really thriving culture and how they establish that in a weight room or a training or medical facility like we have here. So look forward to that next week. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.